G'day, fans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of DNA Reviews as we're looking at the old Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 4. Already, people are starting to forget the show even existed, and they've already moved on because the episode came out like 5 days ago, and everybody said, no, we're on a Star Trek Strange New Worlds and the Orville and all this other stuff, and Top Gun Maverick. What happened to Kenobi? Who knows? Who cares? Mr. Aron, how you going, old son, with a bit of the old Star... sorry to say Star Trek then. How you going with the old bit of the old Star Trek... I did it again. The Star Wars Kenobi shows, dude.
I just think people are forgetting we existed. It's been one of those things. I was just talking to Dags about, there's different ways of looking at stuff. You can download it and binge a season in one go, but Obi-Wan is 1 week at a time. So the last episode, when you get to 3 or 4 days out, just seems months ago.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's, as I said, it's only been 5 days, and it's like people have already moved on. And I feel like as we do this discussion, people have already said, oh, yeah, Kenobi, who knows, who cares? And it's amazing. It is what you call it. It's like not digestible. It's something, what's the word you used about how things come and go really, really quickly?
Disposable television.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, it is disposable television. That's what it is. So, and you can always tell when there's a trap when someone watches an episode of something and their first response is, oh, I can't wait for next week. So they've already discarded what they've just watched and they're waiting for the next big thing rather than just saying, oh, wow, that was great. That was wonderful. Ironically, we're here now 5 days after the fact, 6 days after the fact to say, oh, wow, we're here to talk about this episode that most people have forgotten about. And a lot of people have joined us, which is particularly groovy. And there you go. So good stuff. DJ, I hope to see you guys at Oscon. Was Dags under no, I definitely was not. The last time I wore here's my name drop. The last time I wore a Stormtrooper helmet was actually at Skywalker Ranch in 1993 when it was an original trilogy Stormtrooper helmet. So there you go. Very, very cool. Before we get into the review, Mr. Aron, how you going, old son?
Good. I was in the shop all weekend, so I couldn't make it, but I did see some cosplayers come in, which was interesting.
Did you get people coming in cosplaying as just Star Wars nerds?
There was a Kylo Ren was the only Star Wars one I saw.
Very, very cool. Look at that. Rico's already, I'm not even going to post the comment. He's already he's talking about the end of the episode. We haven't even started it. So for those who aren't aware of what's going on, we're looking at good old part 4. So we're past halfway all of a sudden, and we're getting to the last third. And it was a particularly interesting episode. And I'm sure we'll learn more about it as we get further into the discussion. And as always, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen it or don't care, then that is great. But if you are worried, then sign out now. All right. So hang on. Was it worth taking the shop to the convention? The practicalities of that are pretty difficult there, Mr. DJ. So
no, like I have a shop, so I don't have to do conventions anymore. I like to go just fun. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very cool. All right, so let's kick it off. So the first thing we see is good old Kenobi wakes up, which is particularly groovy, if you remember from the previous episode, which seems like 100 years ago now. Of course, he got roasted and toasted in the fire. And, of course, we've ended up on Jabim. So for those who didn't know, it's actually first referenced in the Legends comic Republic 55. So a few Legends fans were very, very happy about that. And this is our first sighting of what will later become effectively the Rebel Alliance. So what do you reckon there, Mr. Aron? Very exciting stuff.
It was good, carried straight on from the last episode. I think all of the Obi-Wan episodes have hit the ground running so far, and I like that.
Yeah, exactly right. Grant has said you could have said the picture, as in Curly. Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah, that's the representative for the store at Oz Comic Con is Curly. Yes, definitely not. Yeah. So this was there's a whole lot of things in this particular episode. Some parts are good, some parts not so good. This one I thought was actually kind of groovy. And this is all to do with the fact that Kenobi's in the back to tank. And, of course, this explains why he's got no visible injuries when you see him in your New Hope. So it's a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card on that one, which I thought was kind of groovy. Echoes a bit like Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back. But, of course, Vader's going through the same thing. And I thought, hang on, is this trying to imply that after his meeting with Vader, Vader had to go back to his castle and then jump back in the tank as well? Did you interpret it that way as well?
I didn't. I interpreted his dreams were more of an amalgamation of a lot of different things. And because he's still pretty much just news to him that Vader is still alive, that he was having visions of the Bacta tank because of that, not because Vader was actually in it.
Okay, that's an interesting interpretation because I wasn't sure. I thought, hang on, are they both in the tank, their respective tanks at exactly the same time, having visions about each other effectively? And I thought, if that's the case, that's kind of groovy. But by the same token, Vader only just got out of his tank. Now has he gone back in it? So, now he's a completely, because he's watching, I'm going to make a comment about this. Colin has said, you could have sent Chad to Oz Comic Con to represent the store. The idea, Colin, is they want to bring people into the store, not send them away. I can say that because Chad's actually watching right now. So here you go. Here we go. Yes, never send a monkey to do his droid's job. Totally agree with you on that one. Hang on, I just haven't read this one. I thought this time in the back to Sank he was going to find an inner peace in the quiet time again. Yeah, well, that's a good point, and he didn't. It was the exact opposite. Well, he's going through a lot of trauma at the moment, poor old Kenobi, and of course, it's just gotten worse over the fact he's just met Vader, and he's had his bash and crash with Vader, and that didn't work out very well, and he's been injured. So, poor old Kenobi's having a bit of a hard day at the office at the moment. So, yes, very, very cool. And of course, when he wakes up, he discovers something's missing. Oh, yeah, what happened to Leia? So, sorry, man, I cut you off.
I also thought in the back to tank would have been the first, like Grant was saying, a good time to have maybe the first voice or image of Qui-Gon if it was going to happen.
That's a very good point, actually. So you do think for Paul Kenobi, things can't get any worse, that's for sure. So in the tank, it was a forced memory echoes. Well, that's what Aaron's suggesting. And I thought, well, maybe it is. I'm not entirely sure, but I thought, yeah, it was a good sequence. So the two of them were in their respective tanks having a bit of a think about each other. But if the time difference was different, I guess that kind of throws that off. But it looked good. That's the most important thing. So Vader can't rely on his life support. He would need a back to tank for the rest of his life. Well, that's it. We don't know how often he has to jump back in the tank. So whether he can only wander around for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks, and on his off time he goes back, we're not entirely sure how that works. So that's all open for speculation. So, which is particularly
pretty sad for Vader. And when he gets in the back to tank, he's not back to normal. But when Obi-Wan gets in the back to tank, he's back to normal. So I guess that's the more burns that Vader has, I guess. But it is one of those all-purpose things, get out of jail free, like you said. Now they've got the back to tank that they can do that.
Yeah, exactly right. So, and DJ said roughly the same thing. He spends a fair bit of time, like he's having a snooze in the tank. So, and of course, that was established in Rogue One, which is particularly groovy. Now, of course, the episode had a lot of things going for it, as I mentioned earlier, but there are a few things that kind of like a lot of fans go, hang on, this is a little bit kind of cockeyed. And we get this character, his name is Ropen, right? And he's part of the Rebel Alliance. And as part of the whole discussion, Kenobi needs his help to get Leia back, and he goes, I'm not going to help you. I mean, I'm not going to do that. And Kenobi says, oh, effectively, the Empire is evil. And then he just changes his mind and says, yeah, all right, I'll help you. And I thought, what an about face that was. So what do you reckon? Did you reckon that was a bit of a weak sort of moment? It wasn't, because when he said, oh, I'm not going to help you, too bad, so sad, bugger off, Kenobi. And then he just changed his mind and goes, yeah, all right, I'll help.
It is one of those things where he said that because it's written that way, not because there's much character motivation to do it. The other thing, I don't know where it comes into the episode, but I'll bring it up now. If they know where Leia is, surely it is better for Jimmy Smith, Bal Organa, to like say, we know where she is. The Empire, it's outrageous that we've got the daughter of it. Why? Because he isn't in trouble at all. So they should give her back. Yeah,
I did think of that, and I was gonna sort of bring it up a bit later on. It's good that you did that, so don't forget that comment about can they still effectively legally hold her, and I think they possibly can without saying anything to anyone, but we'll cross those bridges. Hang on, there's a whole lot of damaging to, and back that doesn't grow back regularly. You're right, it can't do everything. It's just meant to be superficial injuries by the sounds of it. So I like this one. So they make a point, they're looking at the Fortress Inquisitors. It's all very groovy. And then someone says, oh, yeah, it's got no shields because no one's ever attacked it. And of course, if anybody's played, was it Jedi Fallen Order, that's exactly what happened. And that was 5 years prior to this. So it has actually occurred before. And now I've never played the game. Someone else made that comment. And I thought, well, that was actually particularly interesting. And in fact, they even said, if somebody had attacked it previously, you would have thought by 5 years hence, which is now, the security would have been beefed up. But clearly that got missed in the writer's room somewhere. So, but yes, very, very cool. What do you reckon?
Yeah, cool. I like the graphics that they were looking at too. It did harken back to the original A New Hope and original trilogy, where they have kept that pretty constant with all the Star Wars. That in the Star Wars universe, they never get better graphics than like 70s or 80s CGI.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about some of that later on too. So, okay, they've found out, okay, Leia's been held to the Fortress Inquisitors, okay, which is particularly cool. They're just going to fly on in and get her out, right? Nice and easy. You can't get more simpler than that. And, of course, on the way there, Kenobi's playing with what some people have said must look like a battery. and he's trying to use the Force to move it, and he's struggling with that. And I thought, well, okay, that's actually quite good because he's, as we discussed on the store on Saturday, he's still trying to come to terms with his Force power. But like half an hour later, he's like using it to fix all these sorts of problems. So he gets his mojo back pretty damn fast. So make of that what you will, kids.
Well, I'm going with, you know how people, when they have a surge of adrenaline in a crisis, can do amazing things? Maybe that's how the Force works as well. Can't push a battery, can't push a battery. Oh, no, we're going to die. Push something massive kind of thing.
That kind of makes sense because he did save Leia the same way on Dayu, I think it was, when she's fallen off the thing. So, yeah, under a traumatic moment, it all kicks into gear. But when he's just casually trying to move a battery or whatever it is from one part of the desk to the other, it doesn't work. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I don't mind that. So we're back to Nert, the Fortress Inquisitorius, which is particularly groovy. Excuse me. And, of course, this scene brings up the whole thing that Leia and has been captured by Riva, and they're having a bit of a natter. Now, of course, last week, we were working on the view that, like, hey, did Leia know that Kenobi was named as Obi-Wan, right? And we actually had a discussion about it. Maybe she didn't know that he was called Obi-Wan. And here, it's just straight out. Riva says Obi-Wan is dead. So Leia definitely now knows that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ben Kenobi are the same person. So that does then cock up a bit of the A New Hope discussion of the hologram thing, which I'm going to touch on right at the end of this episode. But for myself personally, I thought, oh, okay. I like the idea that maybe she didn't know that Ben Kenobi and Obi-Wan were the same guy, just like Luke didn't know, right? Yeah. But now it's an absolute no-brainer. She knows him as Obi-Wan, so I thought, damn.
Yeah. And they've also, if it was just last episode or the episode before, she might have forgot it, but now they've obviously gone through stuff together, so she isn't going to forget that they're the same person.
Exactly right. Anyone like the name Fortress Inquisitor? I don't mind it, actually. I mean, the term Inquisitors is kind of bizarre, which was first introduced in Rebels, because, I mean, they're not really actually inquiring about anything. They're just finding people. So it's an unusual title. But the Fortress Inquisitors, that doesn't worry me. But
it is interesting with Star Wars naming, in that a lot of the stuff doesn't sound Star Wars because it isn't familiar. I remember when, this is going back when Episode 1 came out and you had Gungans and Jar Jar Binks, and I was like, none of this sounds like Star Wars stuff. Of course, now it all does because we're all used to it. So maybe some of it settles down and does become more Star Wars sounding after it's laid into a couple of weeks.
Well, there are some that just will not roll off the tongue no matter what. And as I've always said, Dooku, Snoke, and Grogu are like the worst names. I mean, sure, you got some Jedi like Uriel Puff and all that sort of stuff, and you go, oh my God, who came up with that? And Yaddle, and there's just a whole bunch that just make you, it's like fingernails down the blackboard. But anyway, Inquisitor sounds better than Hunters. Yeah, well, that's a fair call. And it is an interesting sort of name. But the idea being, we're Inquisitors, but they're not actually asking any questions. They're just there to find Jedi and knock them off. But whatever, that's how it all goes. And we've now confirmed also that Riva wasn't happy about the fact that there's actually the path, the Jedi escape route that's going on around the place. And I did like the fact that it's actually a nice bit of block of wood that she's just chopped out of the wall. I never thought that wall would have been made of wood, but you never know. And so she's obviously not a very happy camper. What do you reckon?
It's interesting. When I was watching this, I guess when we go forward, it's more about what we see in the future. But I was thinking, I do wonder if they really were getting the Jedi out, or if it was a trap and they are funneling the Jedi to the Inquisitors or the Empire. And you're going to, have a flip where you find out that she's betraying them or something. But we'll talk about that later as it comes. Obviously, that wasn't what was happening. But I thought that would have been a nice little twist.
Yes, exactly right. Now, Grant's asked the question. I'm going to bring it up in a second because I think it relates to what. Now, I've rearranged some of the slides out of order from the show, so that way we don't go from one scene to another scene back and forward. So we sort of will put them all together as a block, okay, for anybody who's really well versed with the episode. So this is a sort of an interesting discussion between Riva and Leia, and the way she actually said that to Leia that Kenobi died, he burnt to death on Mapuzo, rather. It actually gave me the impression, I thought, hang on, does she actually know that he's alive and he got away? Or does she actually really think that he carked it? I wasn't entirely sure. Or did she... I don't know if you thought the same way. I mean, clearly she's trying to get Leia stirred up. Yeah. But I was wondering, because she doesn't make a big thing about saying, Kenobi's still alive, I hate his guts, or I'm glad he died, he's a real bastard or whatever. Because up until now, she was his main focus. He was her main focus. So, and then it's just like, oh no, he just burned to death. Move along. So, I just sort of just chucked it in there. So, did you notice that at all?
Yeah, no, she was just lying. Like being a parent, kids are stupid. You can tell them anything and they'll believe it. And she was just being particularly, manipulative and vile to Leia to try and get the information she wanted. I think she knew that Obi-Wan wasn't burnt to death.
Fair enough. So that means she would have been a tad annoyed that Vader had him in his clutches and then just let him go and be like, "Oh, dude, what are you doing?" So, but interesting point. Because I wasn't the way she presented it, I just wasn't entirely sure. So, because you would have thought you were doing it through gritted teeth, trying to say, "Oh, he's dead," but he's not. Sorry, go on.
The other thing to bring up about this, and it just shows the lack of the Empire. Last week, Vader and that they did the fire thing, and then Obi-Wan kind of fled. They went round about two streets, and then you have the Inquisitors saying Obi-Wan's got away, and now we're never going to be able to find him again. And I was like, what's all that about? I mean, they obviously didn't, but surely the Empire has more, influence on the planets they're in than you can run away and that's it. They don't think you're going to find him anymore.
Yes, yeah, you got to love a few plot holes in your stories, eh? I've got one more picture, then I'm going to get to Grant's comments. So we're talking about the fact that Leia's been interrogated and she's resisting the interrogation, and like she doesn't crack. And I thought this was actually quite interesting because I thought, hang on, how much does Leia actually know? Even if Leia said, "Yeah, I'll tell you everything I know," she doesn't actually know anything. So I thought that was kind of funny. It's like we, the audience, know what's going on, but Leia, the character, has got no idea. She got told to run up a tunnel, meet up with the dude, and they're going to go somewhere, probably take it back to Alderaan. But realistically, what else would you know? She would actually know just as much as what Riva knows because they were both in the same room with all the names scrawled on the wall. So, kind of a bit of a sort of a pointless episode. What do you reckon?
Yeah, the interrogator wasn't telling the truth, and the prisoner didn't know anything anyway, so it wasn't going to go anywhere. I totally agree. I think Leia was just kind of making stuff up as well, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly designed to show that she's not, Leia's not easily intimidated. Even as a little kid, she can actually resist the interrogation quite easily. Which brings us up to Grant's comment. Trying to read Leia's mind opens up a new theory and a new hope. Did Leia resist the probe droid, or Vader use the Force to mind probe? No, they don't. I think it's implied from A New Hope Vader didn't use the Force at all. The mind probe, that was its job, and of course she resisted that. And he actually says her resistance to the mind probe is considerable. So I think they're trying to imply that he did not use. Maybe it wasn't written at the time that Vader could use the Force to rip things out of a person's head. That didn't come into like things like the Force Awakens and stuff like that. So that's how I would interpret it. So they said whether you've got Force abilities or not, you can't. I mean, you can control a person's weak mind, as we see with the Stormtroopers on Mos Eisley, but you can't rip information out. You need the mind probe for that. That's how I look at it. So,
also, Dags and I were having a discussion about this very point on the weekend, and in earlier drafts of Star Wars, there's I don't know if it's earlier cuts or they just took it out of the script before it was filmed, but Tarkin does say that Leia has been taught ways to, withstand Imperial interrogation and mind probes and stuff as part of her princess training. It's in the original script, so don't know if that counts, but yeah, she's probably received some sort of tutorage on how to avoid that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think you could probably argue because of her Force abilities, which are latent and buried deep inside her, that also helps because clearly Riva couldn't get anything out, but she couldn't sense it. Leia had Force capability either, so Leia doesn't know and Riva doesn't know, and of course, as we find out later on, Vader didn't know either. So, who are the best trackers? Sith or Inquisitors? I think they both have their faults. So, but I mean, they use machines for all the tracking. It's not like they're like sniffer dogs or anything. So.
I still put my money on the bounty hunters, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. If it isn't in the movie, it isn't in the movie, doesn't count. Yeah, it's a look. Effectively, that's true. And you can read supplemental material, and sometimes that fills in gaps. But yeah, the argument always is on screen is canon. Everything else is secondary and can be overridden by something that appears on screen. So, but yes, you are right. There's no
actually. DJ brings up one of my most annoying points with the movies where you see a movie and then you go, that didn't make any sense. And then the producers or the director goes, but if you go and read these comics that are coming out, it'll tell you what happened. And I'm like, well, it's your job to tell me, not to make me go and buy comics to like fill it in myself.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And unfortunately, there is actually a lot of supplemental material that comes out with Star Wars. The 1,001 things you needed to know about and whatever, and Star Wars. And it's like, it's all canon, but it's not on screen. It's just someone's written it and it's been authorized by the story group. And even though you haven't seen it anywhere. You go, well, okay, that's how it's meant to be. So, but yeah, some of it can be questioned, and yes, it can cause a few discussions and arguments.
The worst stuff ever is where they're fixing plot holes in the visual dictionary, and then they say, "Oh yeah, that's all canon," and you're just like, "No, it's not. It's the visual dictionary."
Yeah, that's where it gets a tad annoying. And you are right, DJ. If you need to read a comic or a novel or a video game to understand it, and that's exactly right. And the same thing can apply. You can argue with some of the animated shows because not everybody, as we discussed last time, watched Clone Wars and Rebels and whatever, and they're only just seeing the live action stuff and the things that are being introduced into live action that were introduced in animated series form. People could say, well, who's this character and what's that character and what's their story? So, yeah, it's a fair point. Completely, totally agree with you. So, but that's sort of how it goes. All right, so Kenobi introduced. He's got to try and break into the Fortress Inquisitors, and good old Tala makes an appearance. And she's actually quite good in this episode, I've got to say. Good old Tala, sort of coming in and working for the bad guys, even though she was one of the good guys, if you're looking at it from an Imperial point of view, which I thought was kind of cool. And I thought this was a funny moment, right? She's trying to talk to this dude, doing the old hard-assed Imperial officer thing on her, and she actually says she's going to squeal her guts to the Grand Inky, the Grand Inquisitor, about this dude. Now, if you remember, the good old Grand Inky, he's kind of not feeling the flash at the moment because he's got stomach complaints.
He's somewhere in the...
You reckon this guy would have said, well, actually, we haven't seen him for a little while. We don't know where he is. So you can bark up the tree as much as you want. He ain't around, so blow that at you for everyone.
Well, I reckon he's got like the special Imperial health care, and he's in the super Bacta tank that like repairs holes through people kind of thing. So.
Yeah, exactly right. Christy said, special editions, director's version. Yeah, actually, and for those who don't know, as much as it pains to people to accept this, if you've got multiple versions of exactly the same movie, so you got the original version of Star Wars, the special edition, the DVD version, the Blu-ray version, and you think which one is the correct one, whatever the last iteration is, and it's officially released by Lucasfilm, is the final version, right? So canonicity. So if one part contradicts another part. So in other words, the shooting of Greedo shooting first, which has obviously upset a lot of people. Believe it or not, that's actually now canon. That actually overwrites the early versions where Han shot first. So I know it kills you, but that's how the rules work. So for those who don't know. Anyway, so Ewoks blinking, yes, they blink. So deal with the kids. Okay, speaking of dealing with things, so good old Tyler gets into this control room, right? Starts yapping on the comlink, and I thought, mate, it's not half obvious he's up to something shifty, right? Because you're like, they've got to open the gates to let poor old Kenobi in, and nobody's even aware of what she's doing. And I thought this was cool. So it was shades of Phantom Menace, and just like Utagunga, he's clearly not going to get a warm welcome when he arrives. There you go. And I thought, all right, hang on, I've just realised I missed the slide. So you do wonder. Oh no, so I'm going to just stop there for the moment. But so it has been brought up as to whether that's a Dianoga. So. But I thought the idea was kind of cool. He's sort of swimming under the water. He's done it before, so we know he can do it. So what do you reckon?
I had issues from this point in. If you were going to rescue someone on an Imperial base and everyone's looking for Jedi, would you get a convoluted way to go in as a Jedi, or would you just be a pleb stormtrooper and march in behind her? I think there should have been a scene where, it rewrites the episode where they should have just put him in a stormtrooper outfit and he would have done it a lot easier. The other thing is, to get in through that main gate, there's security grids and there's people on computers and there's scanners. Are you telling me they have a moon pool for divers that doesn't have any security that people can just swim into?
Agreed. But you know what? I look at it that whatever was around it, she just deactivated. It'd be silly to open the door and then all the security systems are still in place. I personally had no problem with it. I thought, all right, it kind of works, and it is just like Phantom Menace, but it's a lot of swimming to do. He's got to go down a long way, and of course, I think he can hear her as well. So it's a bit more advanced than the Phantom Menace stuff that he had once before. That's for sure. DJ said this is where the episode starts to unravel. It's a secure town. This is what he's saying. You're echoing what you're saying. You can just find your way in. Yeah, it's exactly right. No dramas. Oh, yeah, quite. I'm on the comlink. Yes, exactly. I've got something funny I'm going to bring up about that in a second.
And the other thing we saw on the way in, which I thought was a Chekhov's gun and they just ignored, you saw when they walked in, that thing was fully loaded with TIE fighters as well.
Yeah, we're going to get to that later on, so don't stress over that. And I agree with you. Yes, the Imperial officer is next to it. Yeah, he can hear it, but he's like, not getting paid enough for this shit, so he's just not even bothering. So, yes, how they got into the fortress is in the video game. Yes, there's a lot of similarities between this and Fallen Order, and like some of the shots are even like identical from the game, and the corridors are the same. But I believe Fallen Order is a bit more realistic than what happened in this episode. So, but don't quote me on that. Either way, he gets in, right? And of course, the first question, even my other half said, why didn't he put on the Stormtrooper suit, right? He knocks out the one guard who's standing there for whatever reason. You would have thought he would have put the Stormtrooper suit on. I thought, okay, if he doesn't do that, fine. But then someone else asked, but hang on, is he going to leave a wet clothes trail all on the floor everywhere he goes? So, but of course, he seems to dry off pretty damn quickly. So, don't let plot holes get in the way of a good story. What do you reckon, old son?
Yeah, maybe they have, when they come out of the moon pool, one of those sort of dryers they walk through. We just didn't see it, and it blow dries them. But yeah, I thought the same thing. There's going to be water footprints everywhere, but I guess, who knows? And it's
Either
one of those.
that.
Maybe we're over analysing it too much, and it's aimed at more of a Disney Plus audience.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Imagine the stormtroopers walk down the corridor and see this massive wet trail going around the corner, and they go, geez, those slugs are getting bigger, aren't they? So, but yes, I mean, somebody even argued, they said in the Phantom Menace, they get Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan get into Utagunga, and they seem to drive very quickly, but of course they go through a special shield. Maybe it's designed to drive them off, whereas in this, it kind of didn't work. It's Hollywood. Unless he stood there for half an hour, just waiting for him to dry off. He's wringing his clothes out and whatever. So, yes. Obi-Wan has lost the ability to handwave these other droids. We can start on one to hundreds of meters. Yes, exactly right. He's a fit lad for an old dude. So, yes, it's kind of, yeah.
Well, he's had all those opportunities to practice swimming while he was on Tatooine.
Well, he was near the fish thing. So, actually, no, it was the fish market, but it wasn't actually a fish, was it? It was a crate dragon. Whatever. Let's move on. All right. So as we've seen, looking at good old Leia, I like the old staring contest. I thought it was kind of cool. And yes, as was highlighted earlier, she's definitely not easy to interrogate. What I didn't get is when the Lola goes to have a bit of a go at it. It's like, what's Lola going to do? Lola's a toy. It's getting attacked by a Sky Electric's car. And I thought, I didn't get what that was meant to do. That just didn't make any sense. So
I think the droids in Star Wars are kind of like the droids in Hitchhiker's Guide. They've got an artificial intelligence, and maybe that one's just got a bit of feistiness about her, like the Daggett from Galactica, where they say, make it bond with Boxy and sort of act like a real dog kind of thing. That's how I interpret it. Like, everyone sort of is a little bit different. Even with us, if you buy a Furby, it starts imprinting on the kid that interacts with it.
Love it. And DJ's just confirmed, yes, Utagunga did have a membrane thing. You see him go through it, and it makes sense because obviously shield the outside water coming through. So it makes a lot of sense.
That must be true.
Yeah, it's in the visual dictionary. Yeah, those visual dictionaries are classic, aren't they? And sometimes they highlight things and you go, are you serious? You actually had to point that out. So,
yeah.
Anyway, where are we? Stand behind the thrust of his Imperial ships. Yeah, that's going to leave a mark, that's for sure. So somebody had pointed out, and I tend to agree, this was a really good moment to learn more about Riva's backstory, and she just barely touches on it, saying that she had something that was taken away from her, and then it was just moved on. She's just putting the pressure on Leia, and clearly it's not going to work. I think even we as the audience can kind of tell that she's wasting her time. Leia's not going to crack because. No. Ironically, she's going to be going through this entire process once again. So, but it was actually a good moment, and and you did think, oh, hang on, is Riva going to pick up on the fact that Leia's got Force capabilities? But of course, that would be a massive break of canon continuity, but it wasn't to be. So,
I don't know if I brought it up last week, but after this week, I definitely think the thing going in Riva's background is Obi-Wan was the Jedi that came and took her away from her family, and that's why she's got a grudge against him, because she was away for a couple of years and then her whole life went to hell. Could be totally wrong, but that's what I'm interpreting the way they're going with this story.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that, and I thought, it kind of doesn't work from my perspective because she wouldn't remember who he was. But, right, it's a good speculation. You never know. So, but her in this episode, it's very funny. And I'll cover it off a bit later on. Her focus on just Kenobi only has sort of gone away, and now it's all the Jedi on the path. So suddenly, she's lost interest in Kenobi, and as we've said, she knows that he survived from last week. And it's like, instead of being on this Kenobi path, she's now on the path, if that makes sense. So it's like a complete shift of focus, which didn't make a great deal of sense. But anyway, so there you go. So we plod along. Good old Taylor's about to be sprung bad by this dude. We sort of covered this off a bit earlier, which I thought was kind of cool. And because how's that for a shot? That's straight out of a certain movie made back in 1977. What you needed was for Kenobi to say, Tala, where could she be?
Well, the other thing from this scene, which is straight out of Scooby-Doo, and I might be getting it wrong, doesn't she knock the guy out and hide him behind the computer banks where everyone is sort of working at just a couple of meters away?
That's exactly right. The room is so quiet, right? She takes this dude out, right? And it's hard to see, but it's happening back here somewhere. It's a really quiet. And I thought, oh, maybe the room is empty. But when she comes back, there's a dude there and there's a dude there. So maybe like what Rico said earlier, they're not getting paid enough to care. But they would have heard something. And there's no way you can take somebody out really, really, even like Ninja can't do it. There's going to be some noises. The guy's going to muffle or there's going to be the when he hits the deck or whatever. So that was kind of dumb. And
done something funny where, you know, they do a close-up and you see that they've got headphones in and you look down at their computer screens and they're playing a computer game or something like that. That would have been funny and made more sense.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, that's a huge risk. And then someone had said, well, wouldn't it have made sense to try and talk her way out of it rather than taking the dude? That's a huge risk, right? Because if those guys had have turned around and there's a dead dude there, they can just hit one button and that's it. The whole plan's destroyed. So it would have made sense for her to say, look, I'm actually in the process of doing this, like she did with the other guy. I'm on a special mission. It's all like, you know, very touchy-feely and very sensitive. And it would have made a lot more sense. But clearly they said, oh, no, just kill the dude, get it over and done with. So, yeah, it was at, yes. Yes, that guy was playing Galaga. Yes, exactly right. Very, very cool. But yes, in a quiet room, you would hear everything. And yeah, anyway, it didn't make sense. So.
Yeah.
Whatever. She asked him to come with her into seclusion. Well, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, I mean, how do you explain that one? Hey, officer, can you come back here with me and let's just chat about it, shall we? And I'll show you my communicators. You show me yours. Yeah.
Long, lonely nights being stationed underwater. He thought he was actually going to get some Imperial action.
There's a lot of jokes you can make about that, couldn't you? Eh? So yes, and after she's knocked him out, you say, "Did the Earth move, or did a move for you too?" So I love it. Stormtroopers are wandering around, and of course, someone did ask, for a high security place, you think they would have installed a CCTV. One of the things that I have missed from the show is the Stormtroopers. If you remember in A New Hope, whenever they spoke, they had that noise from their communicators, right? So it was like a CB radio kind of sound. You know, did you see that? And of course, they don't do that at all in this series. And I thought, it's not exactly precise to what they did in A New Hope. And I always like that because it actually does sound like they're talking through communicators. But, you know, what the hell? And as it turned out, it's not the last time that Kenobi's going to be using the Force to throw off Stormtroopers. So, and I like it makes a sound. They just run around the corner and off they go.
Yeah. So there's a lot. This is an interesting episode because there's a lot of echoes to Kenobi sneaking around the Death Star in Star Wars, and then it's also a lot like a Rebels episode. They did a lot of episodes where they do a raid the Imperial fortress and get out scot-free kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up at the end. So it's very, very cool. Details matter. You're right. That does, and that's the thing. And in this particular episode, there seems to be a distinct large amount of things that go, hang on, that does not make sense. That's just cutting corners and making it too simplistic. Because you remember they're in this high security Imperial base that apparently no one can break into. And Kenobi's just wandering around. And you remember the difference between what happened on the Death Star and what's happening here is that nobody knew that they're on the Death Star to start with, right? There was all they just happened to just arrive. Now, if Riva has got Leia and she knows that Kenobi's alive, you would think they're all waiting for Kenobi to turn up to try and rescue her. So you'd have to imagine the base is on some kind of alert, but of course, in this instance, it's not. So I don't know. Make it like, what you want.
With what DJ said, details matter. The thing that sometimes bothers me with Star Wars, the people making it are such big fans that after the episode you can play Where's Wally and go through it and find all this detail in the background and in the writing when you translate it and all these aliens that you didn't know were in there the first time you watched it. And you can watch it like that and get something out of it. But if they're putting more effort into doing that than putting a good, solid script on the screen, then there can be a problem.
Yeah, what causes a lot of the issues, they say the guy's got to get from this point here to this point here. There's got to be a little bit of action in between, but he's still got to get there, right? And they can't make it so true to life that it's just not physically possible. So they will say, oh, you'll just happen to be walking around corridors where there's no one around. And when someone turns up, he finds a way to hide and he's just ducking through here, there, and everywhere. Nobody notices that he's there. And that's just a way of cutting through all the realistic side of it and saying, well, we just need to get the story finished and people are just going to believe it no matter what, even though we know he's not going to get caught. So
Yeah.
Exactly, with so many plot holes. Imagine how many cutscenes there are. Well, yes, exactly right. It's basic storytelling, but by the same token, it's also cutting corners, and that's the biggest issue. And of course, the idea being they've got to get Leia out, which is clearly going to happen. And of course, the next bit that's got to come up, I'm about to show. What did you want to say?
I guess we've got to look at it like George Lucas originally had it. It's a serial where every episode ends with like, get out of that, and it's just driving through. So there are different ways to view it, I guess.
Yep. Okay, so we get to this part here, and I got to admit the red logos, Imperial logos, were a nice touch. And of course, we weren't entirely sure what was going on. Now, we had said last week, the Fortress Inquisitors is where the Jedi get taken, especially when they get captured by the Inquisitors, to be converted into Inquisitors, right? If that makes sense.
Yep.
But of course, you've got to ask yourself, well, what happens if that doesn't happen? And of course, we end up here. And there's been a lot of discussion regarding this. And of course, there's a lot of people in this particular area. Are they alive or are they dead? We don't know. And I always thought, I looked at the Joker and said, well, why collect lightsabers? You can actually collect the Jedi themselves. And when you look at them, there's a whole stack of them. And there's a couple that have been identified and a couple that haven't. I love the fact that the youngling, they stuck him in there with the helmet on. But it's like the trophy cabinet, really, when you sit and think about it. And I found this to be a very interesting moment. What do you reckon?
Well, I thought we were going to see Quinlan Vos in there, but we didn't. So I guess he's still out there somewhere. This, I presume they are dead because there was a storyline in the Clone Wars where one of the Jedi Masters was put in an amber tank like this, and they were using her force, reaching out to other Jedi to tempt Jedi to come in, kind of thing. And I figured that's what they're doing if they keep their bodies and it has some effect on the force and draws other Jedi there. But that said, could be some other diabolical thing they're trying. I mean, it might tie in later, where they're wanting Jedi genetic material when they wanted Grogu's. It could be something like that as well. We don't know.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Rebels episode where they had Luminara Undali and she was calling out by the Force, but of course she had actually died. They were just using her presence or whatever to do it. Yeah, it was interesting because when you look at this, you think, oh, they're all carted, as in the Jedi guys, but maybe you're right. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's some kind of status field.
Yeah.
And I thought if they are alive, that'd be quite interesting. So, but to have them all on display like that was like, oh, okay, I didn't see that one coming.
I have a feeling we actually won't find out in this series what they're there for. I think that's the last we've seen of them, and it might come up down the track.
Yeah, exactly right. Rico said they have to be dead, otherwise they have breathing masks over them. Yeah, look, I agree. I think they're dead as well, especially with the eyes open and all the rest of it. It was frustrating for me. Obviously, this is all supposed to be comic book video game references. All going to say, I'm not supposed to know who these people are. No, I don't think you're meant to know who they are. I think they would. I think, as I said, one or two may have been identified, but it's just generic people, and you go, wow, who knew? They just happen to be buried in there somewhere, as opposed to saying, oh, look, there's this one, and there's this one, and there's this one. Although for some people, that would have been a case of, oh, at least we know how they ended up, right? Characters that you didn't see after, say, Phantom Menace or Attack the Clones that have suddenly ended up in this room. And then, you're right, there's a connection for the audience to go, oh, geez, how bad is that? This is where they, what their result was. So, not good. Grant, you're right. Han didn't have a mask in Carbonite, and I guess it's open to interpretation as to how people can breathe when they're in carbon freezing, but, whatever. I don't have an answer for you. It's all part of the Star Wars techno babble to make it all work. But otherwise, it's a good observation. Very good. Okay, so we've got this whole saga here. They're going to interrogate Leia, which I thought was pretty extreme. Look at the size of this room. It's like straight out of Brazil, interrogation room, this massive room with a chair in the middle. So
it also reminded me a bit of Snoke's throne room as well.
Yeah, a few people said that as well. So they've also got a lot of space to spare on good old the Fortress Inquisitors. And they're going to chuck her in that and have a whale of a time. And of course, then the lights go out. And I thought, well, Kenobi is taken on to stormtroopers. He doesn't actually have to turn the lights out. He just walks straight in and get them. But, and of course, visually it looks very groovy. And of course, then you get this idiot here who just stands around going, you think he'd have infrared vision on his helmet or something, And he just goes, what? That was pretty.
I like how he warns Kenobi. There's no way to get out of here. He should be the one who's trying to get out because it was obviously he was going to cop it.
Yeah, exactly right. He just stood there like a stunned mullet and away he went. But I thought, why did he turn the lights off? I just didn't get that. But I mean, it looked good and it was all very, very exciting. DJ said, could it be clear carbonite? I don't know. I mean, it's just the Star Wars universe. You put someone in carbonite, they can breathe. Deal with it. So, Yes, I'm sure there's a visual dictionary somewhere that explains and puts all these these words in for things that don't exist in real life. We just got to go, well, that's how it works. So don't overanalyze this stuff. It will give you a headache. That's the only thing I could say. So at least one thing happens. Tala gets captured by Riva, right? And I personally think, and I'm not the only one who thought this, that Tala should have carked at this point to increase the narrative tension, as I've said there. And it would have meant she died for the cause, right? She's gone from an Imperial to a rebel sympathizer. This is the point where she, I think, should have got knocked off. But it's like the old thing, that you can't kill the good guys. And as a consequence, she kept going. So what do you reckon, old son?
Yeah, I thought that as well. And again, it's one of those things where there's a lot of points in this where they could have probably made it a bit more adult, but I do think they're trying for the sort of the more family audience. Although that said, Obi-Wan getting burnt up last week probably was a bit on the dark side for some kids as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like it's a show aimed at a younger audience. We get that, but it's got to cater for the older audience as well. And you can't saccharine it too much and make it too sweet and sickly. You've got to have some dark stuff in there, especially when you're heading into areas and you go, well, I mean, showing the dead Jedi I thought was actually a good thing. And I thought, wow, that's really, really kind of groovy. But by the same token, there's got to be some losses to show for the good guys that, there is a price to pay when you're trying to do the right thing. And I thought the Tala being knocked off would have been the way to go. But of course, as it turns out, it doesn't occur. And she makes a reference that the rebels are on Florum, and apparently that's a nice little link back to the Clone Wars. That's where Hondo Anaka and his group used to hang out, so which was particularly groovy. And but yes, everybody sort of just nicks off and lets it go. So, which then brings us in. Sorry, you're going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that was a nice nod to the Clone Wars.
Can't get any darker than a dead youngling. I totally agree, and I wouldn't be surprised when they were doing that and they said, "Okay, we're going to show all these dead dudes," and one of them is a youngling. That somebody, Disney / Lucasfilm, thought, oh, is that a good idea or not a good idea? And it's like, there's a cut, and if you can upset a few people and whatever. I mean, as we know from the book of Boba Fett, they didn't show the dead Tusken Raider kid. And of course, he was a Tusken Raider, so he had the mask on and everything. Whereas this, they showed a real human being. So, yes, indeed. So good on him for doing it too. That's what I can say. Han was frozen in carbide at night, so no breathing. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is to that one. So, yes, we'll have to move on. In terms of target audience, the prequels all over the place. Episode 1 is very much a kids' film. Yeah, exactly right. And that's the reason why Revenge of the Sith was rated M when it came out. So, I know a few people who didn't show that film to their kids.
I also think they probably learnt from episode 1 how to balance things better. I also think, when you add kids into a movie, they can become annoying. And sometimes in Star Wars that's happened. I think Leia was a good casting. I haven't found her, now we've got young version of Princess Leia. She's annoying. I think she's actually been quite fantastic in this.
Yeah, and of course they were happy to have Kenobi get barbecued last week, and of course people had to wait a week to see if he came out of it okay. So it's good to show that they are prepared to put a little bit of darkness in it. Yeah. So we then end up, and I thought this is kind of bizarre, in the corridor, right? So he's got stormtroopers in front and he's got the droid behind. And I thought, normally that's a no-win situation. You've got nowhere else to go, and yet nobody can hit anything. And this is where it got a bit silly, the fact that he could take on so many people. And, of course, more than these dudes turned up, which I thought, okay. I thought this is where it got a little bit weak in the story. But, of course, we know he's not going to get injured because that just can't happen. And as we see after all this time, all these PTSD character moments from the first episode, they're out the window. Now we're into a good old-fashioned adventure show. What do you reckon?
Yeah, there were some bits there where I'm imagining Spaceballs, oh no, you've caught the stunt doubles kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's like, and this is the thing I found with this episode, because it was like, oh, we've got to get Leia, got to get off the thing, and Taylor's got to be saved and whatever. All the stuff from episode 1, the part 1, where he was like stuck in Tatooine and he was like really having all these mental things and his dark memories and whatever, all that sort of just has gone out the window. If you look at part 1, sorry, I got to stop saying episode, part 1 to part 4, there's like completely different shows. And good old Kenobi, I want to just live on Tatooine, just look after Luke and all the rest of it. All that's gone way out the window now. So yeah, they kind of really did go down a path, and I don't know if it really suits the early part of the episode. So
it is, again, it is interesting because we get disappointed when this happens, but then you look at the Gungan fight at the end of episode 1 with Jar Jar's antics, and you go, well, it's been a lot more childish in Star Wars than we're getting at the moment, so we can't really complain.
Yeah, true. So Rego said he was fine with able to defend himself in the corridor. He's been shown that generally can die from attack from multiple angles. But remember, Kenobi is out of practice, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't done the saber thing since like last week was the first time in 10 years when he fought Vader. So it's not like he, as we've seen, he's trying to move the battery and all the rest of it. It's not all completely zoned in right there and then. Now, admittedly, as you said, maybe it's because the adrenaline thing kicks in, and obviously we've shown that yes, he's now getting his mojo back, but you get a dudes behind you and dudes in front of you, and it's like, well, how do you get out of that? And all it just takes is one of them to shoot straight. Even the droid, at the very least, should have been able to shoot straight, but yeah,
And
it was a little bit too convenient.
why are none of these troopers on the intercom saying, "Send everyone down. The Jedi are here. Leia is escaping"?
Yeah, you would think one hit the button and the red alert goes off. Yeah, I totally agree with you. 1 hour. I agree with you, Gavin. There's been a lot of discussions about this. Was a short one, actually. It was only 39 minutes, actually, whereas the past few ones have been like 51 minutes. So some people did think that they did cut this one a bit too short, and I tend to agree with you on that one. So, yeah. So there were a lot of people who've sort of seen the episodes, have looked at them, or this episode, and have said, okay, some parts work, some parts didn't work. Some people said, oh, this is a really dumb bit, but we like it. But would it work? And of course, this is the absolute ball terror of the lot. No one noticed that this is an Imperial officer with 4 legs, because it's hard to see it, but it's right there. He's got Leia under his coat. So you've got Kenobi's legs and you've got Leia's legs, and nobody notices. These guys, not these guys, not those guys. That no one notices that this dude has got 4 legs. What is the deal with that?
I know, and they run all the way across with stormtroopers running past them, and all the Imperials running past them, and not one of them notices he hasn't got regulation like shaved and all of that kind of stuff. I did think I have to not be so serious about this and realize this is a show for everyone, and kids would find that funny. But I would think that would get you shot by a stormtrooper instantly.
I mean, and there's the bit where she actually opens up the coat so you can see it's her underneath and shuts it again, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, all right. And yeah, it's some people have said, oh, that's actually really quite comical, but would it really happen? And it's hard to imagine that. You wouldn't pick up on the fact that, hey, there's a dude there with 4 legs. What's the deal with that? So
the other thing I have an issue is, you back up a bit, is he closes the corridor on the water, outruns the water, and not one drop gets through. I thought it would have been a lot better if he came out on a flood of water and she slammed the door shut and sealed the stormtroopers in. And we just saw from the Book of Boba Fett, they have respirators if they're in, acid. They couldn't pull that out and breathe underwater as well.
Yeah, I did pick up on that, because you see in New Hope when they say they're opening the magnetic field, there are stormtroopers out there, right? And they can obviously breathe in space. So as to how that works with a helmet that just comes off, I don't know. But yeah, I did think it's like they should be able to survive the water thing. So when the water comes rushing through, I don't know. DJ's agreed. Yes, there should be like using comms and alarms. You would have thought so. It's just common sense, really.
Close all the blast shields. Close all the blast shields and seal them in.
Yeah. So DJ said, yeah, it's ridiculous, and it was actually ridiculous, and not at all.
Well, the other thing is ridiculous, and it's coming up, but it's all a part the escape. If she's put a tracking device in Lola, surely she's expecting them to escape. Isn't that a bit defeatist?
Yeah, and we are going to bring that up. But yes, sit tight. Yeah, it's a good old Jake the Peg scenario. Yeah, it's like, oh, look at that, Jake Peg's instead of 3 legs, got 4 legs. So yes, and what was he the only one wearing a coat? They did actually show that there is actually some dudes wearing coats. That's obviously where they got it from. But you are right. It's when they're walking across this massive area, and there's people crossing everywhere. It's like, what are the chances that no one even picks up on it? And the only one who does pick up on it is Riva. Yes. Right. And her focus now, what?
Maybe one of the scenes they cut out was where they ran through the Imperial sauna and stole all the officers' clothes. That's always a good trope.
Indeed. So I thought this was interesting, right? So she calls out traitor. So her focus, Riva's focus, is now on Tala, who's right there, right? Yeah. But for the past 3 episodes, all she's cared about is Kenobi, and he's standing right there, right? And she doesn't say a thing about it. And it's like, hang on, I couldn't understand the shift in attitude. Why all of a sudden pick on her and not worry about him? And surely she would have recognized him, even with the hat and the coat and the fact that Leia's just back there. That was bizarre. I thought, oh my God, dude, you're right there the whole time. We're about the saber and let's get at it. So,
well, the other thing is, I totally agree with you. She only kidnapped Leia to get Obi-Wan. As soon as Obi-Wan is there, I don't think she'd have even cared about Leia or Tala anymore. It would have been, there's the Jedi, get him kind of thing.
Yeah, because throughout the series, even though the other Inquisitors said we're trying to hunt all these Jedi down, she said, I don't care about them. I'm just focusing on Kenobi. Now, all of a sudden, after the last episode, she wants to capture all the Jedi because she's found the hidden room, right?
Yeah.
And Kenobi's now become the second focus. Then it shifts over to Tala being a traitor. And then even though Kenobi, who was the focal point of the first 3 episodes, is standing right next to her, she just ignores him. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, it was very sloppy. I think they just cut too many corners on that one. So, this is where the wheel say I didn't escape because they were strong character, escape because the Empire comic and actually, I'm going to get to that in a second, DJ. So sit tight, old son. And you are right. It is bad writing. Speaking of bad writing, okay, they're stuck in this platform. What could possibly go wrong? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, T-47s, aka snowspeeders, appear out of nowhere, and they fly into this area under some really, really bad special effects. And then, if you know the sequence well enough, they cut away to all these scenes where these stormtroopers are blowing up. And you go, hang on, did these guys just crash? Did they kamikaze their way in and just crash into the back wall, right? But no, they haven't. They've somehow done a U-turn and escaped. And I thought, who edited that? That was shit. That really, really was. What do you reckon?
It's $25 million an episode, and this is the first episode I've said, there's some stuff in this that looks like a TV show rather than movie quality, and part of it was to do with the speeders in this scene.
It was actually like one of the worst things for the Star Wars TV wise for quite a long time. They fly in at full speed, shooting the shit out of everything, and as I showed in the previous shot, right? If you look at that, this is where they are, and that's where the wall is, right?
Yeah.
How can they stop? They can't turn around. They've got nowhere to go. And I thought, if they've kamikazed their way and actually physically killed themselves, I thought, that's really left. I really like that. That's really different. But no, they've survived. Somehow or other, they've escaped. As in the ships have escaped, and they're flying around doing their thing. Oh, that was terrible. Absolutely terrible.
The editing was really bad because for a while I thought there was more than 2 speeders because they seemed to be doing more and in different, because of the maneuvers they were doing being different places on the screen where they should be.
Yeah, because they show all the stormtroopers getting killed, but then the ships have just vanished. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, where are they? And they're still out there. Now, of course, the question you got to ask yourself is if they could attack, the attack was so easy, why didn't they just bomb the whole place before now? Right? Because clearly it's not that hard to get to. So, and of course, there would be much less risk because clearly they've got Tala, Kenobi, and Leia on here at the moment. But they've come in, and of course, when these guys have come flying through, they've just gone shoot, shoot, shoot. What if they had have killed Tala, Kenobi, or Leia at the time because they're just part of the collateral damage? So, how lucky is it our heroes survive and all the others are getting their asses kicked from here to Christmas?
Why didn't we get a scene with? There's a ship that's jumped out near the planet. Do we launch anything? There's 2 fighters coming in. Do we launch anything? Where are they? I know they're meant to be so formidable that no one will ever attack them, but surely they have some defense, just in case.
Yeah. So it just didn't gel. It made no sense. It was a very, very cheap way of doing it. And then, of course, then we discover that T-47s, aka snowspeeders, can hover. They can just sit in one spot like helicopters. I thought, who knew that? And of course, that then brings up the whole question. If they could do that in The Empire Strikes Back, why don't they just hover around the AT-ATs and just shoot them in all these weak spots? And, when they're flying over to pick up Luke and Han, Zev just plonks straight over the top of the camp and comes down. It's like, where's that all come from? So, I don't know.
And also the shot you had there. Now, I believe the Jedi are really powerful. I don't know how powerful the Inquisitors are. I truly believe Vader could stand there and deflect weapons like that. But did you believe Riva could? Did you think she was that powerful?
No. And I did find it funny. The 5th brother says to her, take the ship down. And of course, she's got to do it and he doesn't do anything. That actually brings us to good old Wade. A lot of people have been making fun about this particular character. He's like the bravest of all of them, and did his death spur on Leia to join the Alliance and all the rest of it. It's like, who gives a rat's ass about this dude? So, he took one for the team.
Well, there's your good guy death for you for the episode.
Yeah. So I agree with you. Yeah, just come on, and it is a bad, crummy writing. It really is. It was a case of said, we've got our heroes there. We've got to rescue them. How are we going to do it? We're going to send in some ships and save them. Oh, okay. This is how we're going to do it. They land on the platform, pick them all up, and off we go. And it's just like, Are you absolutely serious? Yeah, we're going to get to this in a second about deploying ships to chase after them. But before we get to that, right, we should get this sequence here. So the ship's taken off with their heroes up there. Riva's down here. You've got dead dudes everywhere. And as I've said there, it is just like an episode of Rebels. It emulates that directly. So our heroes get into an impenetrable base, save the prisoner, escape without a scratch, while the entire might of the Imperial Empire is meant to look useless and moronic. And that's exactly what happened. They've just taken an episode of Rebels, adapted it for this episode here, and away we go. And it's really, really disappointing in my view. So what do you reckon?
Overall, I was very disappointed by this episode. When I sit at home, and I do this a lot, maybe because I've got a big ego, and go, I could have written this better. If they'd have done this, if they'd have done that, it was so much better. Don't they have script editors? Don't they have people who go through and go, hey, there's this plot hole, there's this plot hole, or do they just charge through and just film it as it is?
Yep, totally agree. And has been brought up multiple times already. You are right. We did establish when the ship was first arriving, they have TIE fighters in their bays. And of course, they could have quite easily chased after these dudes, and they just let them go. Nothing at all. It was like, that makes no sense. Even though Riva says, I planted a tracking device on Lola, at this point in the story, nobody knows that, right? So only she knows that. So it's not like the whole base have said, oh, no, we're deliberately going to let them go. So
it's a ridiculous... It's a ridiculous thing because in Star Wars A New Hope, they have the tracking device because they actually want to find the rebel base and stamp out the rebellion. In this, they don't. They just want Obi-Wan. So why are they letting her go so they can track her? And anyway, if she goes back, Obi-Wan probably disappears because she's just going to go back to Alderaan and Obi-Wan's going to go back into hiding.
Yeah, exactly right. Just cuts the Empire off. And we saw this a lot in Rebels. Rebels was notoriously bad for this, where the heroes are always outdoing the good guys. And in fact, it got to a point they were blowing up Star Destroyers and everything. And it was like, holy guacamole. So, the Empire was just made to be made completely redundant and useless. And as we saw in this episode, you look at it, by the time you get to the end of the story, what did the Empire actually do? What did the Imperials do? Nothing at all. Like zero, right? They didn't do anything. They just lost continually. And it doesn't fit with what would happen in a real life scenario. And of course, this is what I found funny. Vader comes in, cracking the shits over Riva. And I thought, but dude, you let Kenobi get away on Mapuzo. Yeah. It was like, so why are you cracking the shits at her for? It's like you had him right there. You let him get rescued. And now you're cracking this red hot squirts over what she did. I was like, far out. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
And as we found, sorry, I'm just going to cut you off and just get this part in. And as we found out, Riva's now back into disliking Kenobi again, right? Tala, we've moved on from her. It's now back to, okay, Kenobi escaped. It's okay. There's a tracking device on the ship. It's all good. And then, Vader says, oh, I underestimated you. It's like, oh, my God, pitiful.
Yeah.
So, yes. Sorry, dude.
I underestimated the writers. But what you've got to wonder, if I guess he wouldn't. Would Vader, if he had spent any time with Leia, felt that she was his daughter? I guess when he saw Luke on the Death Star, there was no connection. But does the Force reach out like that? Would he have realized?
No, if that was going to happen, it would have happened in A New Hope. And of course, the reason why it didn't happen at that point is because nobody knew that Leia was
you're right.
Luke's sister. Now, it's an interesting point here. I'm sure there's an interesting story as to why the show clearly isn't. It's not the show. It's just this episode. The rest of it up to this point has been quite good. And as we've said, part one was really good. Part 1 and 2 actually gelled together really, really nicely. There's just been a hump on the road for this one.
Well, I guess DJ's kind of right, because if the first 2 episodes of any series are good and then it goes all the way downhill and then the last episode sucks, well, the whole series is a waste of time, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And once you head down the path of being an adventure show, you're just following color by numbers from previous episodes of series, and it just doesn't have the same impact. For whatever reason, they didn't spend enough time on the writing here. Yeah, I think they just painted themselves into a corner. That's a common problem. We need to get into this impenetrable base, rescue the girl, get out without getting killed, nobody dying. How do we do that? And sometimes you're like, we can't do it. We have to invent really farcical situations to get around these issues. And unfortunately, fans pick up on that. So, yeah.
Disney have done this thing, and I've actually said it, especially with the sequel trilogy, where they subvert expectations by putting stuff in that no one expects, so the show is amazing and different. But I would really love a show where they actually ticked all of my expectations and just did an old school Star Wars show that I loved all the way through and go, that was fantastic.
Yeah, exactly right. You're right. A good point there, Rico, about the fact that Vader could have just knocked Riva off right there and then. That would have been kind of groovy, but give him a spin-off, actually, have they? So yes, indeedy doody dotty. But yes, they kept her around. There's always a lull in the series before the grand finale. Well, there shouldn't be, because there's only 6 episodes. We've only got 2 episodes left, so there you go. And they did so well up to this point. So anyway, so how lucky is it, as I've said there, that Riva put a tracking device in Lola? I mean, what are the chances of that? Of the fact that, oh, while I've got the droid, I'll put a tracking device in there, even though I'm fully expecting Leia's never going to get rescued. Oh, she got rescued. How lucky is that? Oh,
you know what I would also, if I was a rebel or worked against the Empire, if I ever had a droid that started glowing red, I'd get rid of it straight away. Look what happens to 3PO when he's like got the red eyes, and you've got the red on this, and all the Imperial droids are red. It is a bit of I guess it's a key for the audience to see, but it isn't like a hidden thing when that happens.
Yes. So this thing brought up a couple of interesting sort of moments, and I thought, and this is the concern I had when they were doing the series, and up until now it wasn't too bad. I thought, okay, are things that are going to occur in this series going to dilute stuff that we see in A New Hope? And as it turned out, it's now starting to occur on a regular basis. The first one that came up earlier was the fact that Leia now knows Obi-Wan is Obi-Wan, right? And that brings up that whole line, right? General Kenobi, years ago you rescued me. It's what it should be. General Kenobi, years ago you rescued me from the Inquisitors and returned me to Alderaan. Now my father begs you to help him in struggle against the Empire. That's how the new dialogue should be. Because as we've discovered and as we've discussed, Bail and Kenobi really didn't have a relationship at all. But Leia and Kenobi definitely do. So realistically, even if Bail has said to Leia, go to Tatooine to drop this message off to Kenobi, she should have said, well, I'll just record this thing saying, oh, yeah, you remember me? Yeah, you rescued me only 9 years ago from the Inquisitors on Nur and Puzo and all these other places. Can you help me out here? That's how the dialogue should be. And, of course, that just ruins, effectively, what occurs in A New Hope, because these two now, Leia and Kenobi, now have a relationship, whereas Bail and Kenobi didn't. And it makes no sense that she would say what she did in the message in A New Hope. So, yeah, it kind of killed that one for me. And just quickly, and I thought this was one of the last things I saw, when Kenobi says, I haven't gone by the name Obi-Wan since before you were born. This is from A New Hope as well, because that's complete bullshit. It's only 9 years prior. Of course he's going by the name of Obi-Wan. So, fibber. How about that?
Maybe he isn't. He continually tells everyone he's Ben. It's just everyone else keeps trying to call him that. But you're right. You're right.
Yeah, and it's the thing that's kind of upsetting me a little bit. It's like breaking what we already had from the thing. And as we've said, Kenobi and Vader have to kind of meet again, because Vader has to be but the learner. So yes, he's had more adventures than what we thought he did have. Sorry, go on.
That's the interesting thing. I was looking into it, and of course we had Celebration a couple of weeks ago, and some of the interviews that Hayden Christensen did, he said he did 8 weeks or 8 months. It was something ridiculous, probably 8 weeks lightsaber training for the battles in this. Now, when you see Vader in the suit, that isn't Hayden Christensen. That is a stunt double every time you see him in the suit. So at some point in the future, we're going to see either a flashback with an amazing lightsaber scene, or like you said, we're going to see him come up and be given his ass handed to him by Obi-Wan, because he's still the apprentice. And I don't know how that'll happen, if his helmet gets half slashed off so you can see it's Hayden inside, or how that'll go.
Yeah, I look at it from the point of view that if you ever watch A New Hope again, a lot of it's just not going to gel the way it once did. And I mean, you got to remember, for the past 40-something years, we sort of looked at it a certain way, and now, well, it's just been made different. So,
well, don't worry. I'm sure.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to cut you. I'll get into here in a sec. Christy, it's up to your turn to give us some yawns. So, can you give us some yawns when you have a chance? Thank you. So, yeah, you rate it. Remember, the more yawns, the worse it was. The less yawns, the better it was. Okay. Sorry, dude. Go for it.
I was just going to say, I'm sure at some point, Disney, now they own Fox and can tinker about with them, will go back to the original trilogy and make the definitive editions where it all marries up. And maybe they can get a visionary like Rian Johnson to edit it so that they marry up with the series that are on now.
Geez, wouldn't that be just absolutely sacrilegious? And they change all these things and put in new voices and cutaways to Luke and Kenobi saying completely different dialogue than what he said in the original movie and all the rest of it. So,
yes.
And yes, it's not good. And I think a lot of us will probably agree on the same thing. So Chrissy's given us 7 yawns for this. So, and in the end, that's the equivalent of 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
It really wasn't much chop to a large degree. What do you reckon, old son?
Well, winding up, I'm going to say I'm pretty hard on the episode. I don't hate it. It's still very watchable television just because of the special effects and the story and the characters and the acting. It's just the writing has really let it down. Give it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'll probably go to 6 because I still like the visuals and I like the style and the production values and all the rest of it. But there was massive plot holes there, as you said. And it's very funny. You watch our review and it's like we're just hanging shit on it the whole way through. And that's not the intention. The intention is to look at something and say, well, okay, what worked and what didn't work? And there's a lot of things in this that didn't work. And my concern is that, one, they're diluting, as I said earlier, what happened in A New Hope, and they're really sort of messing with that now. But also the fact that the strength of the part 1 side, the whole Kenobi's have got these problems, are just being slowly pushed aside to make it just more of a fun adventure show, get people in. I can imagine a lot of kids watching the first episode just tuning out, going, this is boring as batshit. Kenobi's going to work and he's going back and he's cutting up his crate dragon. Whereas in this, he's like shooting stormtroopers and he's got the saber out and all that sort of bizzo. So, yeah, anyway. So I'll give it 6. But yes, I personally think it was definitely the weakest of the 4 so far. So
yeah, I agree with DJ again. It was okay. But I don't want okay. If they've got Obi-Wan and Vader and the original actors back and pumping that much money into it, I want it mind-blowingly good.
Yeah, so hopefully they've only got 2 episodes left, if I'm not, like 5 and 6, so it all fixes itself up. We know at the end of it, by the time it's all said and done, nothing's going to be achieved, right? Leia will get sent back to Alderaan. Kenobi will end up back on Tatooine. Everything's back to status quo in time for A New Hope 9 years later. So it's not like anything's going to be any new revelations coming out. So we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, that's only like a couple of days away as we record this. So we'll have to check it out on Wednesday night and, of course, return next Monday to give our thoughts on part 5. But there you go. So we're going to nick off for this evening. Look after yourselves, everybody. Mr. Aaron, you have a good one, and we'll see you on next Monday. What do you reckon?
We won't. Just to let everyone know who does watch Rip It Off the Card, we're having a mid-series gap this Wednesday, so we won't be doing an episode. We will be back next week.
Very, very good. All right, now I'll leave you to it, everybody, and we'll see you in next week's time. Good stuff. Take care. All the best.
Good night. See you.
Bye.